Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Smarter Campus podcast, where we are changing education one conversation at a time. Today, I am lucky enough to be joined by Ruth Slotnick, Director of Assessment at Bridgewater State University and a nationally recognized leader in higher ed evolution, accreditation, and assessment strategy. Ruth, thank you so much for being here. If you want to just give a further intro about yourself, then we can kind of jump into this.
Hi, Zach. It's finally great to meet you and be here with you today. You did a great job. I mean, really, that's it in a nutshell. My area of interest and expertise is in assessment. You know, when you hang around long enough, you become the senior in the room, and you wonder when that's going to happen, and suddenly happens. For example, I was at an assessment conference about a week ago, and it was a group that I was very familiar with, have been a part of for a long time, and suddenly I didn't recognize anyone in the room. And that's because the field continues to bring in new practitioners of all ages and walks of life, and depending on where they come into the sort of assessment enterprise, we all know that assessment people don't just come from one place. They come from social science, education, engineering, business. We all come in one way or another by hook or by crook, or also we get a degree like at James Madison University. You get a higher education assessment degree. So I've been in the field a long time,
Yep.
and I've always been interested in technology. And I have a learning disability. I have an auditory discrepancy. It is documented. It was with me as a child. I struggled in school. I thought if I had gone through Montessori, who knows what would have happened to me in terms of my own learning. So technology has always played a part in how I, I used to sort of just fall asleep on the tech section of the New York Times because I was always fascinated by technology. So to me, when AI sort of entered the field, I thought immediately, how is this going to intersect with what I do? So that's a little bit about me.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm not quite the senior in the room yet, but one day we'll get there. I get what you're saying. But so if you want to just kind of jump into AI, right? You said you're interested in technology, fall asleep looking at the technology section of that. Where was the first introduction to artificial intelligence?
Well, I mean, really, it was like, who could ignore it? It was all over everything in November of 2022. And those who've been in the space more intensively knew that it was coming, right? You know, Donald Clark, who used to be on LinkedIn but not on LinkedIn anymore, was very present in the field and talking about AI integration. He's written many books on the subject. Even the book Genesis, the late Henry Kissinger's book, he really lays out the steps with his co-authors of sort of the building of artificial intelligence. And then also, of course, you've got Ethan Mullick, right, who is like out there and giving us like little glimpses of the otter, and he kind of he draws your attention to this. Can it draw an otter, and then can it and over time he shows how this thing eventually gets the otter on the plane and sitting there in its plane seat looking at a picture of an otter drinking a Coca-Cola. So, you know, it's like watching the progression of this thing over time through eyes of experts. Was just I just kind of was along for the ride, right?
Yeah.
Among
Yeah.
others, like just along for the ride. And I was in the ride of the stock market, watching it go up and down. I was in the ride of X and the space of going up and all the drama with Ethan Mullick and not Ethan Mullick with Musk and with Sam Altman. And I was just sucked in to all the drama as well as watching everything unfold. So to me, it was like I just naturally fell into it rather than resisting it. And that's the best way to just to describe it. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
so how does this tool help me do what I do?
Yeah. I mean, so then let's jump into that. How does it help you do what you do, and how
Yeah.
has your job changed in the last
Well,
3 years?
Well, I don't know if that my job is intensified. It's been augmented by the tool. So this thing comes out, and I am, as my colleague Joanna Boeing, we've been working together for uh, 11 solid years. So we know each other. We work very closely day in and day out. And I know her strengths. She knows my strengths. She knows my weaknesses. I know hers. And she also knows that sometimes in the morning, I'm a morning person. I've got a lot of energy.
Hmm.
So I'm like, look, look, look. There's a new directions in teaching and learning and a special edition on AI and assessment. Let's put something in for it. And so that was early, maybe February 2023. And we're like, okay, well, what are we going to do? And so we decided, okay, let's start testing out the technology. Now, she was more of a resistor. So it was very interesting to see how she responded to the technology. And we kind of balanced each other out. I was on the extremes, she was on the cautions, and then I kind of brought her closer to the middle, and she brought me closer to the middle. And with each other, we just said, okay, let's use standard qualitative research practice and look at a data set that we have and think about how we would clean the data, prepare the data, work together to synthesize and argue with each other and code the data, right? So now, how can the technology be a partner? And so we
Okay.
tested it. We tested it sort of as we called it sort of our neophyte undergraduate researcher.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's how we tested the technology. So one of the roles of the assessment practitioner on campus, Zach, is they have to work with academic programs for the programs to think about how are they collecting the story of student learning writ large for their entire program. So if it's a social work program, there's an outside specialized accreditation that comes in and accredits that program. But there's also what used to be called regional accreditation. Don't know if you ever heard of it, but all institutions have an outside entity that accredits the
Yes.
institution. Okay. So
Yes.
my job is to help the academic programs tell their stories of student learning.
Okay.
And often, what I know from research that I've done with Mark Nicholas, we did it in 2024, we did it in 2014, we did a comparison analysis of a 10-year decade, a decade that has
Yeah.
gone by for people like us that work on campus that tell those stories. We work alone. And so I'm lucky I have a Joanna, but most people don't. And some shops that are really, really big that might have 20 people are rare. So the assessment practitioner tends to kind of just work alone. So having a qualitative partner in AI with using
Yeah.
using a good qualitative practice is a great way to think about augmenting. That's why I say it's AI has augmented what I do.
Okay. I like that. So I really kind of want to dive into that because there's a lot of people that have siloed positions like yourself, right? And it's kind of like, you have a partner, like you said, but like a lot of people have siloed positions. And I think the way you're using AI is so perfect, right? It's so that it can help you do the things that took a lot of time, right? It's not going to take your job. It's going to help you have someone to bounce ideas off of. So, like you said, you treated it as like an undergraduate assistant, right? Like I'd love for you to kind of explain that process a little bit more of how you like actually started.
Sure. So in order to prepare for this publication,
Yeah.
what we did is we started by first looking at the data individually. We cleaned
Okay.
it, then we looked at the data individually.
Yep.
We came up with our own thematic analysis. We did a little bit of coding, and then we said, okay. At the time, we had it was Bard, and then what was Copilot called before it was Copilot? Bing, I forget what it was called. It's
Yeah.
called something else.
Yeah.
And
No
then,
worries.
ChatGPT 3.0, perhaps. It was like,
Yep.
the earliest model. And we scrubbed that data set. We talked about it with each other, and then we said,
Yep.
okay, let's test it in Gemini. Same prompt in Gemini, same prompt in Bing, same prompt in ChatGPT. We didn't like the way Bing was going, or whatever the Copilot was at the time, and it was still that product was still kind of coming along, and we kind of just set that one aside. So we worked with the Gemini product and the ChatGPT product, and we tested the prompts with each. At that time, there was no like easy way to put in an Excel spreadsheet in.
Yep.
And to me, those feel like ancient days, right? Those are like
Yeah.
long, long
It's
time ago.
crazy.
And so we compared to see how well it did. And sometimes it went into hallucination land, which, on one hand, as a creative person, I shared with you before this podcast, I'm a potter. And
Yes.
I used to work with Shelley Carson at Harvard. And this idea of creativity having a little bit of, what we'll call, a little bit of nuts is actually conducive to creativity. Too much of it deadens it, right? So in some ways, the chat GPT has to have some hallucination built in because it allows for its creativity. It is built in by the engineers, right? But it would careen off the edge. It would take an edge case and like blow it up. And we knew the academic departments. We would say, you know what? That's just one department with one example. It is not a theme, right?
Yeah.
So we had to
Yeah.
yank it back. We had to yank it back from the undergraduate research and say, no, that's just one incident. Go back, look again. So that's how we were treating this thing. We assumed it was going to make a lot of mistakes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's great. It's funny that you touched on the like hallucinations or creativity because before last week, I had never heard anyone say that. And last week I was at an AAC and AACSB conference. I was running a workshop on which I also learned a lot about accreditation there, which I didn't know much about, which is a funny crossover. But someone there said hallucinations are how we like move forward with creativity, and it needs to be looked at less of a negative thing and more of a positive thing that you understand. And I think that you touched on that perfectly. You're assuming that it's making a lot of mistakes, but that's not necessarily the worst thing ever. I just wanted to kind of give my thoughts on that. But next question is, so that's how you started using it, right? So how have you grown in the last 3 years in using it, and what does that look like today?
Well, it's one thing to think about it operationally. And Office of Assessment, we think about operations all the time. We basically are project managers. We're thinking about gen ed assessment. We're thinking about how to work with the academic programs. We're thinking about how we're collecting these annual reports, how we're putting these reports together for the provost, for the deans, for the academic chairs of the departments, for them to think about how are they using this data they collected to improve their academic programs. That's all operational. The next step, which is where we need to be in the field, is now working with the academic faculty to A, help them think about the operational pieces, like how can AI help them with report writing?
Yeah.
It is a loathsome task for all of us. Who likes report writing? If you're out there and you like report writing, well, good for you, because most of us don't like report writing. So it can take it can do longitudinal analysis for you. You can load in 5 years of reports of annual assessment reports and have it do a summary analysis and wrap that together for a program review, which is a different process than accreditation. Every academic program goes through some sort of program review. It can be internal, it can be external. So the philosophy department might have a program review coming up where they have to talk about how have they used their assessment results to help improve their program.
Okay.
So, on one hand, my job is to perhaps help faculty think about how can you use this technology to write those reports? Okay, so that's one. But if we look over on the other side, it's like, and how are you helping students build fluency within your academic program through the curriculum to A, prepare them from your field practice, your discipline practice on how the technology intersects the discipline and or field and what it's going to look like by the time the student completes the program and what data will you have that says that students are fluent. Those are,
Yeah.
so you see how they're two very different things. One is helping like use the tool operational, and the other one is integration, full integration into the academic program, creating a learning outcome and getting some
Okay.
data.
So fluency, yeah, I love that. I want to dive into the fluency side of things. So
Sure.
how are you teaching faculty to teach fluency? And then what are you finding? Like how are you assessing if someone's fluent or not? Yeah.
Well, first of all, I don't work down at the level of teaching faculty. I
Okay.
talk about silos, and maybe
Yep.
maybe that's the morphed role in the future of the assessment practitioner. The assessment practitioner will become more of a designer,
Yeah.
part of a design team. Like my dream team would be to work with a learning designer. um, I would be there. And perhaps, someone who's the technologist, like really
Yeah.
thinking about like the shape of things, and maybe even a student in the room, right? We think about, okay, like how does this really intersect the discipline? And how do we help faculty think about the interactivity with the student in the space? And what do the students need? And even in some cases, the students may teach the faculty. So, we have to be open to that. What I'm trying to do right now is the way to build faculty fluency is just offer them a little bit of money for them to do some experimentation. That's how my institution is working. Now, if you go to ASU, they're doing something completely different. They have an enterprise, version with OpenAI. Northeastern University with Lance Eaton now has Anthropic. So these institutions have these large enterprise subscription systems that I don't have at Bridgewater State University. So assessment directors need to work within their own positional power within inside of their organizational structure that may or may not be AI friendly. So, the first thing you got to do as an assessment practitioner is determine where you are in your power structure and where you have a sphere of influence. Because I don't really have a lot of influence outside of my interactions with the actual faculty. So the way that I'm helping to build faculty fluency, and maybe it will somehow sort of slough off into building student fluency, but baby steps here,
Yeah.
is to offer a little bit of money for them to start thinking about how does AI intersect program learning. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm running a series of mini grants. There's 7 faculty that are experimenting, and they will tell me about them in user case interviews in June. And I'll have more at that point to share in terms of how's it going for integration into the program learning side of it. And then I'll offer another series of mini grants in the fall, and we'll see where we go. And those are the baby steps I'm taking. Otherwise, I have to really depend on my Office of Teaching and Learning partner
Yeah.
or the AI center to really talk about the faculty fluency piece and then how that integrates into student fluency.
Cool. Well, is that something your university's focusing on, like becoming student teacher fluent or an AI, or is it?
That's a great question. I would say ultimately, yes.
Okay.
Do I feel like we're on a super slow highway? Yeah, I feel like we're turtling along. I'd like to be on a speedway.
Yeah.
And it's hard because again, you got to look at sphere of influence. Like I can try to be innovative in my own space, but how do I help the institution be innovative overall? And
Yeah.
and
I mean, that's okay. Like what you just said is so many people I talk to every day, that is what they often all say is like, I'm trying, but I like, how do you recommend using you working in your space to influence others? Because I think what a lot of people try to do is go tell everyone what they need to do, but working in your own space and influencing seems to be a very effective strategy. So if you want to talk on that, that'd be great.
Well, I think, I do what I can.
Yep.
And in some cases, the message may be, I'm sorry, you're going to have to leave your institution and go someplace where someone wants an innovator, right? And those institutions that want the innovators are going to be our leads. And in some cases, you have to see like just how far you can push to get a sort of, get yourself a seat at the table to push. And when your institution doesn't really provide those spaces, well, what do you do? So I'm involved in I've been tapped to do a guidebook for state level assessment practitioners. That's in the UMass system, the community college system, the state public institutional system. So what we're doing is we're building a 10 chapter guidebook on how do you get it? How do you get a seat at the table? How do you start? Where do you start? And what's your readiness like? And at the end of the guidebook, hopefully, like, do you feel more ready? Are you ready? Can you get in
Yeah.
there? Where can you start? I mean, Zach, we have some institutions where their institution bans it, right? So just imagine we have a range of some institutions that are banning use to some institutions that are accelerating use. The other place where I think institutions need to think about it to help them build their institutional strategy, and this is the conversation that I had with a state rep that came into my ceramics booth this weekend when I was selling my work, is I
Yeah.
said to him, he came in with this like, everyone's walking around with shorts and t-shirts on, and this gentleman strolls in, and he's got a suit jacket on and a tie, and he looks like he's dressed for work with a little, Massachusetts pin on his
Yeah.
lapel. And it's like, you look like you're going to work. And he's like, well, actually, I am working. And he's running for state rep for the town of Brookline.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? Do you mind if I take your ear for a minute? Because I think there's something you really need to hear. And this is where I think institutions need to think about everybody at the table and who can really help move this speed highway forward. Massachusetts is a lead in fintech, ed tech, health tech, education. We're a national leader. We always have been. We have community colleges. We have the UMass system. We have the public system. We have the privates. But there is no one leading for the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts, bringing the sectors together and thinking about how do we take the greatest, the most thoughtful minds in the Commonwealth of
Yeah.
Massachusetts and link it, and K through 12, and link it up. So we have workforce development pieces. We have the K through 12 system. We have the higher education system. Then we have all of the wonderful possibilities for our graduates to consider right here in Massachusetts. So I said, can you get that conversation going? Because we really need it.
Yeah.
And and then a few minutes later, this electronic dog comes walking by. So it's like we're almost there, but hopefully our provincialism and our traditionalism won't be our barrier, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's great. I think we're running up on time, but I want you to touch on something that you just said, the like traditionalism and the other word that you said, don't be the barrier. Because I think that happens a lot, right? Like these big institutions are historically incredible. Like you said, Massachusetts is historically progressive. Like, how do you not throw away what's happened in the past to move forward, but like keep it in mind, I guess.
I think you have to meet faculty where they're at, right?
Okay.
You got to start with the early adopters, the coalition of the willing, and that's where it feels a lot like to me a familiar space. Look, faculty aren't don't always necessarily want to talk about assessment. They will say they do assessment in their classrooms. They assess students all the time. Why do they need to do a program level assessment if they're already doing teaching a 4-4 or a 5-5 load and they're already doing an assessment? They're making a judgment on student learning. Well, because that's an individual course-based judgment. We extract samples, stratified random samples from across the entire program so we can see how is the student doing,
Yeah.
overarching, how not just a single course judgment, right? Because we have all sorts of, time management, we have late papers, we have all sorts of things that go into grades.
Yeah.
So assessment is not a thing that everyone wants to talk about. And AI is not the thing that everyone wants to talk about. And we're going to have resistors and big resistors, and we're going to have those that are like, yeah, I want to check this out. My students are already coming in. They're already
Yep.
innovating. They're pushing me along. I want to push them along. So I think unfortunately for some institutions, and I say unfortunate because we're kind of rolling along with it. It's just
Yep.
kind of, we're turtling along. We're not speedwaying. And so I think we have to kind of satisfice. That's an actual word in the policy literature, right? Satisficing, satisfying and satisfaction. We're satisficing someplace that's somewhere between, we have to have some innovation centers on campus. And I think we're heading there at Bridgewater.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
we've got to have those early adopters who take us there that are faculty that are showing faculty what to do, as opposed to an administrator coming in and saying, here's what you need to do.
Yeah.
So we always start with where students need to go. Students need to go when they complete to be ready for the workforce. If we don't give them the skills, then yeah, then they're going to fumble. They may cheat. And as Mike Kentz will say, give them a metacognitive space, and give the faculty some space to feel like they can fail. So what my faculty have said to me, Ruth, thank you for this, lighting a fire under our butts to try this. Thank you. It's only $500.
Yeah.
So I say, give faculty a place to feel like they're like, well, what's the parameters? I'm like, look, the sky's the limit. Just check it out. See what you can do.
Great kid. Yeah. I think you should. There's this guy named Paul Matthews. He's the first person I ever interviewed on this podcast. He's from Australia, and he says the way to get teachers on AI is two T's: teaching or training and time off. And I think like you paying people is it's so helpful, right? Because it's ridiculous to be like, do this, and we're not going to help you in any way, shape, or form. You just have to
Yeah.
turn your job upside down. But last two questions I ask everyone. We're up here on time. If this is a big one, so if you need a second to answer it, if you could snap your fingers and change one thing about education, what would be changed after your fingers were snapped?
Hmm, that's a great question. I think we would see a really open space where we have an iterative practice between both students and faculty, where we're we may move more into sort of more collaborative hands-on spaces and project-related learning. But what we see, if we were fly on the wall, we
Yep.
see a space in the classroom where everyone feels vulnerable and open to using the technology and also show and telling how the space is really both informative, or where the technology really just has limits, and in what way that there's a practicing of the human always in the loop.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's always a fun question and answer to hear what people say. People go so many different directions, and
I
I really like
bet.
that one. But last one, what's your favorite way to use AI outside of school, outside of work? My
Hmm.
example is I use it for cooking all the time. Uh, so
Yeah.
I don't know, this is a fun one.
Wow. Well, we use it for trip planning around here and cocktail making.
Cocktail making,
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah,
That's
because
that's
let's say you have like a little of this and a little of that, and you want to want to change it up and then give it a name.
that's awesome. What's your favorite cocktail you've made with
Ooh,
this and the name?
well, I don't know if I have one per se. I mean, I think we've done sort of twists and variations on
Okay.
themes.
Yeah.
So and I've shared with others is that I'm helping my 89-year-old dad use the technology. He got very upset when he couldn't get his Chat GPT to work. So just imagine that, right?
Yep.
And he uses it to sometimes compose letters to friends. He had a friend who was ill and passing away, and so he used it to talk about losing his friend Jake. So it's like it can become a companionship opportunity. And when you have elderly parents that are, 87 or 89, but still are interested enough to use it, like when I say, look, my 89-year-old dad can use it. So if my 89-year-old dad can use it, so can you,
Yeah.
right? Give it a
Yeah.
shot.
Well, I think that's a great way to wrap it up on that statement. Anything else you want to say before we close it out here?
No, I think I've watched you sort of grow in your interviews, from talking to fellow students about it to a number of colleagues who are in the space talking about it, disrupting the space, offering generously. I mean, that's the other thing, Zach, is that there's so much generosity on LinkedIn, for example, or people sharing in their YouTubes or their Substacks. Like the generosity. If you're not on LinkedIn, you're missing the conversation. You're completely missing out actually on daily sort of check-ins with folks, and some of them were contentious and eye-opening and innovative conversations. And thank you for helping us lead in this space.
Thank you, Ruth. I really appreciate everything you do for the schools and honestly just for the space and education as a whole. It's incredible to see kind of what you're doing. I'll have all of Ruth's information in the YouTube links and everything else that I'll be posting, and I will see you guys next week. Thank you so much for being here.